Just reading assertions with waptek. Couldn't watch the whole video clip. You lost me at gravity. It's not a complicated concept. Basic idea of gravity, as far as we can understand, because it doesn't just apply to the Earth, because it does apply based on how heavy an object is. We're using that definition based on the definition again kind of idea. But basically, if you weigh an object that has a set weight, like a kilogram, on Earth, and you weigh it on different places on Earth, you get different pull strengths. It weighs different based on how far you are away from the core of the Earth, or how much matter is between you and the core of the Earth. It's a very tiny change, but it is measurable. And you measure it not against another weight on a balance, you measure it against something that has the ability to detect it. We use strain gauges and that sort of thing. And you can use things that are easily understood to confirm this. Next, when you move around, movement causes an effect that's very similar to gravity. If you keep accelerating at a very specific rate, it creates a tilt of gravity. It creates a g-force, and that g-force, acting like gravity, can be made pseudo-constant or literally constant. Gravity is indistinguishable from acceleration in a way. Now here's the problem. You can define gravity just because it makes it easy to do the math using acceleration, functions. And coincidentally, if you have a vacuum or even in air, when you drop something, it accelerates. It literally is acceleration. But why? Well, the only things that would work to make all of these experimental outcomes make sense is putting in the effort of, let's see if all of the acceleration math routines we have and equations match. It doesn't mean that it is acceleration, but is it going to match? Would the equations work? Can we just use them? Then, something that bothers a lot of people when you talk about gravity, desert file joke, is when, not if, we inevitably got to where we could get high enough above the ground that we could run out of air to work with, but still be able to get up there using a helium or hydrogen-filled balloon. And then when we inevitably got to where we could fly fast enough that we could create g-forces that made it to where we could nullify g-force 1 and make it to where we effectively could leave Earth, escape velocity, or at least get outside of the atmosphere. Because the atmosphere does get thinner, eventually there is no atmosphere. Whether you like hearing that or not. We ended up with the two combinations necessary: a lack of drag and literally a lack of sanity, and let's go up in space. And we found out that you can put something in a high enough orbit that there's not enough drag to slow it down, and it effectively keeps falling, quote-unquote, forever, and has no effective gravity reference for anybody experiencing it. And it doesn't stop happening. You can keep them in orbit. You have to be going very, very fast if you're close to the Earth, as far as how many times you orbit. And you stay within orbit. You don't just fly away. You're still bound to the gravitational pull of the Earth. And then the next set of experiments with higher and higher altitude things, because we figured out how to do it, we found out that gravitational pull doesn't really ever go away, but eventually you can be moving fast enough, true escape velocity, that you can escape the gravitational pull of the Earth. You can also deliberately make an orbit that goes out really far and come back, or make a high orbit for polar satellites. We use that. But by that point, we're up in space and we're already finding out that we can put something in orbit around another planet, or have it land on the moon, and find out its static gravitational pull, g-force, matches up with something akin to being in a pool, and find out that a 1 pound weight doesn't weigh 1 pound by an ordinary scale or any other way of measuring it. So that means gravity isn't relative, it's just dependent on something, matter, conventionally. Now, we have a limited range of knowledge about this, but we've experimented with almost every planet in orbit around the Sun and the Sun itself. The equations keep working out exactly the same way, and the equations don't change just because you don't like them or you do like them. They're also a major mofo because they do set some limits on what will and will not go through the universe and galaxies and our little solar system in this mess. That also means that we've run into actual speed limits and mechanical limits to what we can do. You can't go above a certain speed, or you will go into a a trajectory and at a speed that makes it effectively impossible for you to be able to return. You go on a non-returning, non-orbit. It's sometimes called a hyperbolic or parabolic orbit. You don't orbit anymore. You're not orbiting. You're escaping. So when you run into these things about gravity, and you can test for them, you run into a problem with trying to argue with a person like even me or anybody who can just look this shit up, telling me gravity doesn't exist. So let's go on. This person may not be saying it. I've only read part way through. Let's not make assumptions. I'll just state that gravity is the word used to describe an object being pulled to Earth. No, it's the gravitational pull that you're referring to by pounds and whatever isn't just based on the Earth. It's based on any large body. We have found no exceptions to this. It's a fact. When people scream the word fact, this isn't all caps. That usually means they don't know what they're talking about, but he's not doing that. Let's not assume. It's a fact that things are, but the why is not a fact. It's a theory. The theory of you existing isn't a fact either. For all I know, you're a bot. But lacking knowledge of these sort of subjects, demanding that something be called just a theory, is an escape hatch for a coward. It's not theoretical because we can test this. We've already been able to test it. Just denying the information because you don't like what it implies doesn't make any sense. And again, there is no practical value in this. But you said the why is a theory. No, it isn't. We've been able to figure out that matter distorts time-space from observing things that are rotating on their axis, creating warps in time-space, literally watching literal time-space wobble like jello. That's the best we can do to find out anything about it. Because gravity acts over an insanely large area, large surface area. It's like a stretched surface. It's not a surface, though. It's three-dimensional. We could wake up and realize that the why is different, but the fact that things are pulled to Earth will remain, and also pulled towards Mars, and the Moon, and the Sun. Why are you making a Earth-centric or egocentric universe? But maybe you're not. It's misleading to use this as an analogy, and evolution is no different. Wrong. Evolution is even more well established. We've also demonstrated we can manipulate evolution. That's what we call animal husbandry. We have been selectively breeding instead of naturally selecting animals for a very long time. We have more information to prove evolution works from observation and experimentation. Gravity doesn't have much experimentation except for just going to other places in the universe where Earth's gravity isn't dominant. It's the Moon's gravity, or even literally a comet having gravitational pull being more important than every other object in the entire solar system. Why would you deny this? Because I don't like what it implies for some reason? When you dig into the psyche of a person who denies something that you can test and confirm, they always have some cowardly bitch-ass shit reason for doing it, but I don't know what your reason is. Evolution is no different than gravity, except that it's even more well established. And again, as anybody knows, you can find an example that doesn't follow the rules we think of evolution. In fact, we already know about them. The majority of life forms on this planet follow patterns that are done by natural selection and what we call evolution. It's not just a theory. And everybody knows that when you say not just a theory, this is the ultimate comeback to everybody who says that, because they're literally just lying about what the word theory means. But I don't know if that's where you're doing it. Decades ago, it was predicted that the science progressed, it would only reinforce the theory of evolution, but it's the opposite that happened, more and more gaps being brought to light in the theory. No, it hasn't. What you find is there's a larger scale political pushback of people finding exceptions and then screaming about them as loud as possible. Reposting the same Quetzalcoatl fly, or the same penguin that doesn't follow evolutionary rules as were predicted how many decades ago? Doesn't change the fact that we found out that those had to be incorporated into the rules about evolution. You see, the problem with science is it isn't an assertion that was made 2,000 years ago that you have to keep propping up. It's a discovery that was made that keeps evolving, because every time we find out something new about it, we incorporate it. When you find out that there's something incorporated new into the theory of evolution, or actually the understanding of evolution, you decide that it proves that the theory made hundreds of years ago was wrong. But when anybody points out that you can't prove that Ophir is, some particular place, or you can't prove that a certain person ever existed, or that they were actually separate people, or maybe combined people, when you find out that your 2,000-year-old outdated, useless data source doesn't make any difference anymore, you backpedal it. Science doesn't. Science doesn't incorporate the bumps in your head to figure out your maladies. That's left to, well, snake oil salesmen. When science finds out it's wrong, it says it's wrong and moves on. It's supposed to. And when it doesn't, we all jump all over it and beat the living crap out of it and make it do it again. Evolution is no different. You finding quote-unquote gaps when you can't prove a flood happened on this fucking planet means that you're not just anti-science, you're anti-fact. There were multiple floods, not just one flood. It was a story about a main flood. It's a ripoff of the story of Gilgamesh. But anyway, let's move on. People scramble to bandage up the concept and explain away detrimental facts. Are you talking about your Bible or the Quran? Or some writing of some rabbi from a couple of hundred years ago? Or an assertion by a certain king who decided that he was just going to change the religion in his country because it was a state-run religion and that's what you're really worshiping? The word of a king? James. Not Rick. So, I'm blown away that people so subjectively try to protect the Bible, the theory of evolution. I liken it to a religion which, oddly enough, is made up of secularists. Now that's irony. I've never seen a person come to my channel, this is the punchline, I've never seen someone come here who is asserting something about religion being wrong and saying evolution's wrong and using exactly the same wording. Look at the link below and look at my write-up and see if I swap the words around to see if I got away with doing anything here. Glass houses? Yes, there is a variety of person who denies gravity and evolution exists or can be shown to be happening. But that's what we call it now. We don't really know exactly what they are. We don't understand time-space warpage. Okay, we can't experimentally test gravity. If we could, I'd be the first one flying a fucking flying car in front of people to prove it. Because if we could warp time-space by warping gravity, gravity-powered propulsion, we would not be limited to the solar system anymore. It's the last form of reality in time-space. It's the last set of dimensional components that we do not know how to manipulate. We can manipulate radio signals a little bit, the electromagnetic range. We can manipulate heat, matter, we can do all sorts of things. But we still haven't figured out how to warp gravity. I want my flying skateboard. So do you. So when we have that happen, then we can actually experimentally test gravity. What I don't understand is why you don't understand that we've already tested the living shit out of evolution. Well, anyway, thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. And why the pushback about something that literally doesn't affect you on a daily? Oh, that's right. That's why we have bacteria and viruses evolving every year, because they evolve. We're the environmental pressure. They aren't anymore. We make them mutate because we can defeat them. So what is your opinion on vaccination? And why isn't it exactly the same thing homeopathy claims? Homeopathy doesn't work. Vaccination does. Triggered yet?